The rain poured relentlessly, each drop hitting the pavement like a drumbeat echoing Elliot's pounding heart. He stood motionless at the edge of the schoolyard, his small frame trembling under the weight of his backpack and the stifling laughter of his classmates. His fingers clutched a worn notebook to his chest as though it were a shield. "Elliot the robot," one boy jeered, his voice cutting through the downpour. Another chimed in. "Do you think he even understands what we're saying?" "Probably not. He's too busy in his weirdo world." Elliot's mind was a whirlwind. Words hurt more than he could explain, but he couldn't let them see his tears. Inside that notebook was his sanctuary, a world of gears, sketches, and vibrant colors, where every page came alive with drawings of things he dreamed of building someday. A place where he wasn't strange, but extraordinary. And now, as their laughter grew louder, mocking every piece of who he was, Elliot felt a surge of anger. At them, at himself for being different, and at the world for not understanding. A football flew past him, splashing into a nearby puddle, followed by the loud bark of his tormentor, Jason. "Hey, robot boy, fetch that ball, huh? Or is fetching beneath your genius?" The group erupted into fits of laughter, and Elliot clenched his jaw. He wanted to yell back, to say something that would make them stop, but the words stuck in his throat like dry leaves. He knew he'd never win against them. Not here, not now. Just as the rain started to soak through his jacket, a familiar voice called out, "Elliot, sweetheart, let's go." His mother, Rachel, stood by the gate, an umbrella in one hand and a warm smile on her face. Elliot didn't run to her. He didn't move at all. Instead, he stood frozen, his feet planted in the mud as his notebook slipped slightly from his hands. One of the boys saw his hesitation, darted forward, and snatched it from his grip. "Hey, give that back." Elliot's voice cracked, but his demand only made them laugh harder. Jason flipped through the pages, the vibrant sketches and intricate blueprints clearly visible despite the rain. "What's this? Some kind of spaceship? Oh no, wait, are these robots? What kind of freak are you? Stop." Elliot lunged forward, but Jason held the notebook high above his head. The others egged him on, shouting suggestions. "Tear it. Throw it in the puddle. Let's see if it can fly like a real rocket." Elliot's heart raced as Jason pretended to think about his options, dangling the notebook teasingly. The other kids cheered, and with one swift motion, Jason hurled it into the air. Time slowed. The notebook tumbled through the rain, its pages fluttering like broken wings before landing with a sickening splash in a muddy puddle. Elliot's breath hitched as he stared at the sodden mess. For a moment, the world around him disappeared. There was no laughter, no rain, just the sight of his sanctuary destroyed. He dropped to his knees, scooping up the notebook, its once vivid pages now a blurred mess of ink and water. Rachel was by his side in seconds, her hands gently on his shoulders. "Elliot," she said softly, her voice full of concern. But he didn't respond. His hand shook as he tried to peel the pages apart, only to watch them tear under his touch. The bullies were still laughing as they walked away, their voices fading into the distance. Rachel looked at her son, her heart breaking at the sight of his silent devastation. She wanted to say something, anything, to make it better. Instead, she reached out and pulled him close, shielding him from the rain with her umbrella. Back at home, Elliot sat at the kitchen table, staring at the remains of his notebook. Rachel placed a cup of hot cocoa in front of him, her hands lingering on his for a moment. "Elliot," she began, her voice soft but firm. "I know it hurts. What they did was wrong, and you didn't deserve that. But this notebook, what's in here, this is you. And no one can take that away." Elliot looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears he could no longer hold back. "They hate me because I'm different," he whispered. "Why can't I just be normal?" Rachel knelt beside him, her gaze unwavering. "Elliot, being different isn't a bad thing. It's what makes you special. Those kids, They laugh because they don't understand. But one day they'll see. One day they'll wish they were as brave and brilliant as you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a fresh notebook. This isn't to replace the one you lost. It's to remind you that nothing can stop your creativity. Not some bullies, not even the rain. Elliot hesitated, his fingers brushing against the crisp, blank pages. Slowly, he took the notebook and nodded. Rachel smiled and kissed his forehead. Now go fill it with everything you're capable of. Show the world who you are. As he turned the first page and picked up his pencil, a small spark of hope ignited within him. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The next morning, Elliot walked into school clutching the new notebook. The memory of yesterday lingered, the mocking faces of Jason and the others flashing in his mind like a reel on repeat. But today felt different. His mother's words echoed in his head. Show the world who you are. He didn't know if he could, but the idea planted itself firmly in his heart. He slipped into his seat quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The teacher, Miss Daniels, entered the room with her usual cheery demeanor. "Good morning, class," she greeted, her voice light, but commanding enough to quiet the chatter. "Before we begin, I have an exciting announcement. Our school is hosting an art and innovation contest this weekend. It's open to everyone, and the winner will get their project featured in the city's community showcase. Plus," she added with a smile, "there's a nice little trophy involved." The class buzzed with excitement. Hands shot up as students began asking questions. Can we work in teams? Does it have to be a painting? What if we don't know how to draw? Elliot remained silent, his gaze fixed on his desk. He had no intention of entering. Even if he wanted to, he could already hear Jason's voice. What's Robot Boy gonna do? Draw stick figures. But as Ms. Daniels continued explaining the contest, something stirred in him. His fingers traced the edges of his notebook. This could be his chance, not to prove anything to Jason or the others, but to remind himself that his ideas mattered, that his imagination wasn't something to be ashamed of. Still, the thought terrified him. What if he failed? What if they laughed again? The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on his chest. That evening, Rachel found Elliot sitting on the living room floor, his new notebook open and his pencil hovering above the first page. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, sitting beside him. "What's on your mind?" "There's a contest at school," he mumbled. "Art and innovation. I was thinking about entering." Rachel's eyes lit up. "Elliot, that's wonderful. What are you going to create?" "I don't know yet," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. What if they laugh at me again?" Rachel reached out, placing her hand gently on his. "Elliot, every great inventor, every artist, every person who's ever made a difference started with someone doubting them. Sometimes, those people laughed. But do you know what they all had in common? They didn't let it stop them. They kept going because they believed in their vision. And I believe in yours." Elliot looked at her, his eyes searching for reassurance. "What if I'm not good enough?" Rachel smiled. "You don't have to be perfect, Elliot. You just have to be you." That night, as the house grew quiet, Elliot sat at his desk, the light from his lamp casting a warm glow over his sketches. He flipped through the ruined pages of his old notebook for inspiration. The drawings, though smudged and torn, still told stories of a world he dreamed of creating. Machines that could fly without fuel, homes powered by renewable energy, and gadgets that could help people communicate without words. He thought about the contest's theme, innovation. Slowly, an idea began to take shape. By the next morning, Elliot was a boy on a mission. During lunch, instead of sitting alone in the corner as usual, he headed to the library. He spent hours researching, scribbling notes, and refining his sketches. Day by day, his project came to life. He didn't share what he was working on, not even with Rachel. It was his secret, his way of proving to himself that he could do this. But the week wasn't without its challenges. Jason and his gang noticed Elliot's newfound determination and took every opportunity to taunt him. "What's he working on? A robot that cries when it gets wet." One of them sneered. Elliot clenched his fists but said nothing. He kept his head down and focused on the finish line. He couldn't let them win, not this time. The night before the contest, Elliot barely slept. His room was a whirlwind of paper, pencils, and small makeshift models he'd crafted from scraps around the house. As the clock ticked past midnight, he stepped back to admire his creation, a prototype of a machine designed to translate drawings into three-dimensional objects. It was simple in its design, but to Elliot, it was a symbol of possibility. He named it the Creator. The morning of the contest arrived, and Rachel drove him to the school gymnasium, where tables were set up for each participant. Elliot set up his station quietly, placing the Creator at the center with a few examples of how it worked, a hand-drawn sketch of a house transformed into a small 3D paper model, a design for a robot arm translated into a tiny prototype. Around him, other students displayed paintings, sculptures, and projects ranging from impressive to modest. Jason's table was a spectacle. He and his friends had teamed up to create a flashy science experiment, complete with smoke effects and a poster board covered in bold, exaggerated claims. When Jason spotted Elliot's project, he smirked. "That's it. Looks like something my little brother would make." Elliot didn't respond. He focused on setting up, his hand steady despite the knot in his stomach. As the judges made their rounds, the room buzzed with anticipation. When they finally reached Elliot's table, he took a deep breath and began his explanation. His voice started soft but grew stronger with each word as he demonstrated how the Creator worked. The judges leaned in, clearly intrigued. One of them, an older man with glasses, smiled warmly and said, "This is remarkable, young man. Truly innovative." Jason, who had been watching from across the room, frowned. His experiment, while flashy, lacked depth, and he could see the judges were more impressed by Elliot's work. For the first time, Jason didn't have a snide comment. He just stared, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. When the winners were announced, Elliot's name rang through the gymnasium. The crowd erupted into applause, and Rachel, standing at the back, wiped away tears of pride. Elliot stepped forward to receive his trophy, his heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and joy. As he held the trophy high, he glanced at Jason, who stood in the crowd, his expression unreadable. That night, as Elliot placed the trophy on his desk, he opened his notebook and began sketching again. For the first time in a long time, he felt proud of who he was, not despite his differences, but because of them. He had shown the world a glimpse of his imagination, and it had been enough. The laughter that once haunted him felt distant now, replaced by the sound of applause and the belief that his dreams could shape the future. The next week at school, things were different. Elliot walked through the hallways, his trophy tucked carefully into his backpack. It wasn't to show off. It was a quiet reminder to himself that he had done it. The whispers followed him now, but they weren't the same as before. Instead of mockery, there was curiosity. Students he barely knew pointed him out, murmuring, "That's the kid who won the contest," or "He made that cool invention." For the first time, Elliot felt seen, though he wasn't sure how to feel about it. In class, Ms. Daniels announced that the school board wanted to showcase his invention during the upcoming parent-teacher night. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, and the idea of presenting the Creator again, this time in front of an even bigger audience, both thrilled and terrified him. Ms. Daniels must have noticed his hesitation, because she crouched beside his desk after class and said, "Elliot, you've got something special. Don't let fear keep you from sharing it with the world." At lunch, things took an unexpected turn. Jason and his group approached Elliot's table. He braced himself, waiting for the usual insults, but Jason surprised him. "Hey," he said, shoving his hands into his pockets. "So, Congrats on the contest or whatever. Elliot blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Thanks, he said cautiously. Jason glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening, before adding, that thing you made, it was actually kind of cool. I mean for a, robot thing. Elliot didn't know how to respond. Was this an attempt at an apology? Before he could figure it out, Jason's friend nudged him and muttered, "Simon, man, let's go." Jason gave Elliot one last awkward nod and walked away. It wasn't much, but it was enough to leave Elliot wondering if maybe, just maybe, things were changing. That evening, Elliot sat in his room, fine-tuning the creator for the big showcase. He wanted it to be perfect. Rachel peeked in, a cup of tea in hand. "How's it going, champ?" she asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. Elliot looked up from his work, a small smile on his face. "I think it's ready. But what if I mess up? What if it doesn't work this time?" Rachel leaned forward, her gaze steady and full of warmth. "Elliot, do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a boy who turned his imagination into something real, something that inspired people. You didn't let fear stop you then, and you won't let it stop you now. Trust yourself." Her words stayed with him as the days leading up to the showcase flew by. On the evening of the event, the school gymnasium buzzed with activity. Parents and teachers mingled, students showcased their projects, and the air was filled with a mix of pride and excitement. Elliot's station was set up near the center, a prime spot where everyone could see his invention. As he adjusted the display, he caught sight of Jason lingering near the back of the room. Their eyes met for a brief moment before Jason quickly looked away. Elliot wondered why he was there. Was it out of curiosity? Jealousy? Regret? He shook the thought from his mind and focused on the task at hand. When the time came for Elliot to present, a hush fell over the crowd. He stepped forward, his palms sweaty, but his voice steady as he explained the concept behind the creator. He demonstrated how a simple sketch could be transformed into a 3D model, drawing gasps of amazement from the audience. Even the school principal, a stern man rarely seen smiling, nodded in approval. But then, just as Elliot was about to finish, disaster struck. The machine sputtered, its mechanisms grinding to a halt. A murmur spread through the crowd as Elliot's heart sank. He fiddled with the controls, his mind racing. What had gone wrong? Had he overlooked something? His confidence wavered as he felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension. "Do you need help?" It was Jason. He stepped forward hesitantly, his usual bravado replaced by something quieter, almost genuine. Elliot hesitated but nodded. Together, they examined the machine. Jason pointed out a loose wire, and Elliot quickly reconnected it. With a soft hum, the creator sprang back to life. Relief flooded through Elliot as the crowd erupted into applause. He glanced at Jason, who gave him a small, almost sheepish smile before stepping back into the crowd. After the event, Rachel hugged Elliot tightly. "You were amazing," she said, her voice filled with pride. As they packed up to leave, Jason approached them. "Hey, Elliot," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for, everything. What you did tonight, it was pretty cool." Elliot studied him for a moment before replying, "Thanks, and thanks for helping with the machine." Jason nodded, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. "Maybe we could work on something together sometime. I mean, if you want." Elliot didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure if he could fully trust Jason yet, but the gesture felt sincere. "Maybe," he said finally, offering a tentative smile. As he and Rachel walked to the car, Elliot felt a strange sense of closure. The boy who once laughed at him had now been the one to lend a hand. It didn't erase the hurt, but it was a start. And for Elliot, that was enough. He glanced at the night sky, the stars twinkling like the gears in his imagination, and whispered to himself, maybe being different isn't so bad after all. The weeks following the showcase brought an unexpected shift in Elliot's life. At school, the whispers that once carried mockery now held admiration. Students who had never acknowledged him before began greeting him in the hallways. Even teachers who had often overlooked him started asking about his next project. Elliot wasn't sure how to handle the attention. Part of him felt proud, but another part of him wanted to retreat into the quiet safety of his imagination. Rachel noticed the change and encouraged him to embrace it. "Elliot," she said one evening, "you've earned this. Don't be afraid to let the world see how brilliant you are." Despite her encouragement, Elliot remained cautious. One day, as he worked on sketches for a new idea during lunch, a shadow fell over his table. Looking up, he saw Jason standing there, holding a tray of food. "Mind if I sit?" Jason asked, his tone unusually polite. Elliot hesitated but nodded. Jason slid into the seat across from him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "So, bud," Jason began, glancing at Elliot's notebook, "what are you working on now?" Elliot hesitated. He didn't want to share too much, unsure of Jason's intentions. "Just some ideas," he said simply. Jason nodded, fiddling with his fork. "Look, I know I've been a jerk, like a really big jerk. I don't have an excuse, but I guess I was just jealous. You're really smart, and I didn't know how to deal with that. So I made fun of you instead. It was wrong." Elliot stared at him, caught off guard by the admission. He had imagined countless scenarios where Jason might apologize, but he never thought it would actually happen. "Why are you telling me this now?" Elliot asked, his voice quiet but steady. Jason shrugged, his gaze dropping to the table. "Because I saw how cool your project was, and because, well, when you didn't laugh at me or push me away after I messed up your machine, it made me realize I don't want to be that guy anymore. The guy who tears people down just to feel better about himself." Elliot considered his words. He didn't fully trust Jason yet, but there was something sincere in his voice. "Okay," Elliot said finally, closing his notebook. "If you're serious about changing, then maybe we can start over." Jason looked up, surprised. "Really?" Elliot nodded. "But no more mocking or name-calling. If you want to be friends, you have to respect me." Jason extended his hand. "Deal." Elliot hesitated for a moment before shaking it. From that day on, Jason made an effort to prove he was serious about being better. He began sitting with Elliot at lunch, asking questions about his projects, and even defending him when other students tried to make jokes at his expense. It wasn't an instant transformation. There were still moments where Jason slipped into old habits, but Elliot noticed that he was trying, and that counted for something. One afternoon, Jason approached Elliot with an idea. "So I was thinking," he began, leaning against the wall near Elliot's locker, "what if we teamed up for the district science fair? It's coming up in a few months, and I bet with your brains, and well, my ability to, talk to people, we could win." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Talk to people?" Jason grinned sheepishly. "Okay, maybe I'm not the best at that either, but seriously, think about it. We could make something awesome." Elliot wasn't sure how to respond. The idea of working with Jason was daunting, but the prospect of creating something together intrigued him. "I'll think about it," he said. Over the next few days, Elliot couldn't stop thinking about the science fair. He spent hours sketching ideas in his notebook, considering what he might create. The thought of collaborating with Jason still made him uneasy, but Rachel's words echoed in his mind. "Don't be afraid to let the world see how brilliant you are." Finally, he decided to give it a shot. The next morning, he found Jason in the cafeteria. "Okay," Elliot said, setting his tray down. "Let's do it, but we're doing this my way." Jason grinned. "Deal. So what's the plan?" Elliot opened his notebook, revealing a sketch of a device he called the communicator. It was a machine designed to help people with speech difficulties express themselves through visual and auditory cues. Jason stared at the drawing. his usual smirk replaced by genuine interest. "That's actually really cool," he said. "How does it work?" Elliot explained the concept, and as he spoke, Jason listened intently, asking questions and offering suggestions. For the first time, Elliot saw a different side of Jason, a side that was curious and eager to learn. It was strange, but also strangely comforting. The weeks leading up to the science fair were a whirlwind of activity. Elliot and Jason spent countless hours in Elliot's garage, working on the communicator. Jason, to Elliot's surprise, proved to be a quick learner. He helped with assembling parts, testing prototypes, and even coming up with ideas to improve the design. There were moments of frustration, wires that didn't connect, circuits that shorted out, but they always found a way to push through. Rachel often brought them snacks and words of encouragement, watching from the sidelines as the two boys worked side by side. She couldn't help but marvel at how far Elliot had come. The boy who once hid behind his notebook was now collaborating, leading, and embracing his creativity in ways she had only dreamed of. Finally, the day of the science fair arrived. The auditorium was packed with students, parents, and judges, each table displaying a unique project. Elliot and Jason's table stood out with its sleek design and interactive display. As the judges made their rounds, Elliot explained the communicator with confidence, while Jason demonstrated how it worked. The judges were impressed, not just by the device, but by the teamwork and passion behind it. When the winners were announced, Elliot and Jason's names were called, and the room erupted into applause. Elliot couldn't believe it. They had done it. As they stepped onto the stage to accept their trophy, Jason leaned over and whispered, "Told you we'd make something awesome." Elliot smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt before. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above his fears, his doubts, and even his past. And, in a way, it was about showing Jason that people could change if they were willing to try. That night, as Elliot placed the trophy next to his first one, he opened his notebook and began sketching again. This time, the ideas flowed freely, unburdened by fear or doubt. He wasn't just imagining a better world, he was creating it. And for the first time, he realized he wasn't doing it alone. In the weeks following the science fair, Elliot's life continued to change in ways he never anticipated. The victory had not only boosted his confidence, but also made him a figure of inspiration throughout the school. Teachers frequently mentioned his project in lessons, encouraging other students to follow his example. Even students who once ignored him started asking for his advice on their own projects, often stopping him in the hallways to talk. It was overwhelming, but for the first time, Elliot felt like he belonged. Jason, on the other hand, had become something of an unlikely ally. The same boy who used to mock Elliot now sat beside him in the library during lunch, helping him brainstorm ideas for new inventions. Jason's transformation wasn't just noticeable to Elliot. It was a topic of discussion among the other students. Some admired his willingness to change, while others whispered that he was trying too hard to make up for his past. Jason brushed off the comments, focusing instead on proving to Elliot, and perhaps to himself, that he could be better. One day, while they were working on a prototype for a new project in the garage, Jason asked a question that caught Elliot off guard. "Do you ever think about what it would have been like if we hadn't been, well, jerks to you? Like if we'd been friends from the start?" Elliot paused, the soldering iron in his hand hovering over a circuit board. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted, "but I don't know if I'd be the same person I am now if things had been different." Jason frowned. "What do you mean?" Elliot set the soldering iron down and leaned back in his chair. "I mean, yeah, it hurt. More than I think you'll ever understand. But it also taught me something. It taught me to be resilient, to find strength in myself, even when no one else believed in me. If you'd been nice to me from the start, maybe I wouldn't have learned how to stand on my own." Jason nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I guess that makes sense. But still, I wish I could take back all the times I made you feel like you didn't matter. You're making up for it now, Elliot said simply, offering a small smile. That's what matters. The conversation marked a turning point in their friendship. They began spending more time together outside of their projects, finding common ground in their shared love of problem solving and their growing desire to make a difference. Jason even started sharing his own ideas for inventions, and while they weren't always practical, Elliot appreciated the effort. As their friendship deepened, so did their ambitions. One afternoon, Jason approached Elliot with a bold idea. "What if we started a club?" he suggested. "A club?" Elliot repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, like a place where kids can come to work on projects, share ideas, and learn from each other," Jason explained. "There are probably other kids like you out there, kids who feel different, who don't think they fit in. We could give them a space to feel like they belong." Elliot considered the idea. The thought of creating a safe, welcoming space for students to explore their creativity resonated deeply with him. "I like it," he said finally. "But we'd have to make it really inclusive. No one gets turned away." "Agreed," Jason said, grinning. "So, what should we call it?" They spent the next hour brainstorming names before settling on the Inventors Guild. With the help of Ms. Daniels, they secured a classroom after school and started spreading the word. To their surprise, the response was overwhelming. On the first day of the club, over 20 students showed up, eager to learn and create. Elliot took the lead, teaching the group how to brainstorm and sketch ideas, while Jason focused on organizing materials and making everyone feel welcome. The atmosphere was lively and collaborative, a stark contrast to the isolation Elliot had once felt. Watching the students interact and support one another, Elliot felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced before. As the weeks went by, the Inventors Guild became a hub of creativity and innovation. Students worked on everything from simple DIY projects to more complex designs, with Elliot and Jason guiding them every step of the way. The club even caught the attention of the local newspaper, which ran a feature story on the initiative. The article highlighted how two unlikely friends had come together to build something extraordinary, inspiring others in the process. But the true test of their efforts came during the school's annual open house. The Inventors Guild was given a prime spot to showcase their work, and Elliot, along with the other members, spent weeks preparing for the event. On the night of the open house, the room was packed with parents, teachers, and community members, all eager to see what the students had created. Elliot stood at the front of the room, nervous but determined. As he welcomed the crowd and began explaining the club's mission, he noticed Jason standing off to the side, giving him an encouraging thumbs up. It was a small gesture, but it gave Elliot the confidence he needed to continue. The presentation was a resounding success. Parents approached Elliot and Jason afterward, praising their initiative and thanking them for giving their children a place to thrive. One mother, whose son had struggled with social anxiety, pulled Elliot aside and said, "You've changed my son's life. He used to come home from school so withdrawn, but now he's excited every day to work on his projects. I can't thank you enough." Elliot felt a lump rise in his throat. "It's not just me," he said, glancing at Jason. "It's all of us, working together." That night, as Elliot lay in bed, he reflected on how far he had come. The boy who once hid behind his notebook had found his voice, his confidence, and a purpose greater than himself. And the boy who had once been his bully had become one of his closest friends. Their journey wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt and difficulty. But it was real. Elliot opened his notebook, the same one his mother had given him months ago, and wrote down a simple phrase: "Being different isn't a weakness, it's a strength." As he closed the notebook and turned off the light, Elliot felt a quiet sense of contentment. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he was excited to find out. And he knew, no matter what challenges lay ahead, he had the resilience, the creativity, and the support to face them head-on. Months after the open house, the Inventors Guild had grown into something bigger than Elliot and Jason could have ever imagined. The once small after-school club had expanded into a full-fledged program with the school's support, complete with new tools, equipment, and even a small grant from a local community organization. Students who once felt invisible now had a place where they could shine, where their ideas mattered, and where their differences were celebrated as strengths. Elliot, now more confident and self-assured, had become a leader in ways he never thought possible. But leadership wasn't easy. With more students joining the club, conflicts occasionally arose. Differences in opinion, frustration when projects didn't go as planned, and even moments when some students felt overshadowed by others. Elliot, who once avoided confrontation at all costs, found himself stepping into the role of a mediator, ensuring everyone felt heard and valued. One afternoon, while working on a particularly ambitious project to design a solar-powered water purification system, a heated argument broke out between two members. Elliot noticed the tension escalating and stepped in. "Hey," he said firmly but calmly, "this isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about finding the best solution together. We're a team, and we solve problems by listening to each other, not by tearing each other down." The room grew quiet as the students nodded, their anger dissipating. Moments like this reminded Elliot of how far he had come, not just as an inventor, but as a person. Jason, too, had evolved in his own way. While he still had his moments of bravado, his focus had shifted from trying to impress others to genuinely contributing to the group. He had become Elliot's right-hand man, often taking on the role of organizing events and reaching out to local businesses for sponsorships. It was Jason who came up with the idea to host a community invention fair, inviting other schools and organizations to showcase their projects alongside the Inventors Guild. The invention fair quickly became the talk of the town. The students worked tirelessly to prepare, with Elliot and Jason leading the charge. The weeks leading up to the event were filled with late nights in the garage, brainstorming sessions in the library, and endless trial and error as they perfected their projects. Rachel often brought snacks and words of encouragement, watching with pride as her son and his friends poured their hearts into their work. The day of the fair arrived, and the school gymnasium was transformed into a bustling hub of creativity. Tables were lined with displays of all shapes and sizes, from simple contraptions to complex innovations. The air buzzed with excitement as students explained their projects to curious visitors, many of whom were community leaders, engineers, and educators. Elliot's project, a more advanced version of the communicator, drew a particularly large crowd. He had spent months refining the design, making it more user-friendly and versatile. This version included a feature that allowed users to customize the device with their own voice or images, making it even more personal and effective for those with communication challenges. As he demonstrated the device, a man in a sharp suit approached him, his expression thoughtful. "This is impressive," the man said. "Have you considered applying for a patent?" Elliot blinked, caught off guard. "A patent?" "Yes," the man continued. "I work with an organization that supports young inventors like you. We help turn ideas into reality, and I think your project has real potential to make a difference." Elliot's mind raced. The idea of his invention reaching beyond the walls of his school was both thrilling and terrifying. "I'll think about it," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous excitement bubbling inside him. By the end of the fair, it was clear the event had been a resounding success. Local news outlets covered the story, highlighting how the fair brought the community together and celebrated the ingenuity of its youth. The Inventors Guild became a beacon of inspiration, proof that even small ideas could lead to big changes when nurtured in the right environment. But it wasn't just the public recognition that made the day special for Elliot. As the gym emptied out and he helped clean up, he noticed Jason sitting at their table, staring at a small, hastily built model he had created, a prototype for an affordable collapsible shelter for the homeless. "Hey," Elliot said, sitting beside him. "That's really cool. Did you come up with this on your own?" Jason nodded, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about my dad. You know, he used to work construction, but when he lost his job, things got bad. We almost lost our house a few years ago. I guess I just wanted to do something that might help people like him." Elliot felt a pang of understanding. He had never known much about Jason's life outside of school, but this glimpse into his struggles made him realize how much they had in common. "I think it's a great idea," Elliot said. "We should work on it together." Jason looked up, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You'd really want to help me with this?" "Of course," Elliot replied. "That's what friends do." The two of them sat there for a while, sketching ideas and brainstorming ways to improve the design. It wasn't just about the project. It was about building something meaningful, something that could make a real difference. As the months turned into years, the Inventors Guild continued to grow, eventually expanding into a community-wide initiative. Elliot and Jason's friendship became a testament to the power of second chances and the impact of choosing kindness over cruelty. Their journey wasn't without its challenges, but every obstacle they faced only strengthened their resolve. Elliot's inventions went on to receive national recognition, earning him scholarships and opportunities he had once only dreamed of. But no matter how far he went, he never forgot where it all started, in a rain-soaked schoolyard, clutching a notebook and facing a world that didn't yet understand him. One evening, years later, Elliot returned to his old school to speak at a special event honoring the legacy of the Inventors Guild. Standing before a room filled with eager young faces, he smiled and began his speech. "When I was your age, I thought being different was a weakness. I thought my ideas didn't matter because other people didn't understand them. But I was wrong. Being different is your strength. It's what makes you see the world in ways no one else can. And when you embrace that, when you surround yourself with people who lift you up instead of tearing you down, you can achieve things you never thought possible." As the crowd erupted into applause, Elliot felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for how far he had come, but for the journey itself. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was his. And in that moment, he knew that every challenge, every setback, and every triumph had been worth it.